So I think we are probably live now.
You think we're live?
I think we're live.
Uh-oh.
So
All right. So
we should say who we are.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm Tricia Broderick.
I'm Jay Calabrese.
And we're with Agile for All.
And we're coming to you live from San Francisco.
But an empty class because it's early here.
Yeah, they're all still. Hopefully they're not still sleeping, but maybe they're on BART or they're on their way here somehow.
Well, we start class at 8:30, so we may have some people walking in behind us. They may see that we're online and stand in the hallway too because they don't want to be online.
Don't want to be online.
But we'll let them make that call.
Yeah. So our topic, we were thinking about a number of things, but being that we're in this Agile leadership class, a topic that came up yesterday and usually comes up in these classes is this kind of manager versus leader thing. So there's a lot of memes out there in the internet. Here's a manager and here's a leader, and then it compares the two.
The manager's always frazzled and stressed out, and the leaders, got halos and everything.
And it really doesn't make any sense to us, because most of the management versus leader stuff that's out there, it really is talking about some leader that probably doesn't really exist in real life, and a manager who is just bad, and not a bad person, but they're just not doing good management, and the meme doesn't really help anything. So
I think it just stereotypes it further and stuff along those lines.
Yeah, it just, hey, let's create a worse problem than we have. Let's take a manager who maybe isn't sure how to manage a self-organizing team, and let's belittle them. That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and the hard part, when I got promoted into management is you often get promoted for the skills that you did in your previous job, not necessarily the skills that you have in your current job, and no one's teaching you this stuff. So in some ways, we perpetuate the problems of bad management in that regard, because we manage the way that we were managed. We do the things that we thought worked, or what worked in our last role, not necessarily our current role.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing happened to me. And I was fortunate to have some great managers, but they were kind of teaching me good management kind of just by doing it and me picking it up, and frankly,
not really talking about it or explaining.
Well, I don't think they knew. I think they just I was fortunate to have a number of people early in my career that just were really good, but just because they were just really trying to be good people and trying to listen, but they couldn't really explain it or didn't really know exactly what to do, how to do it. So why do you think why is it so easy to having that dynamic of just labeling management bad and leadership's good? Like, what's leading that charge, do you think? I think a lot of it goes just back to there's probably a zillion reasons perhaps, but a lot of it just goes back to people trying to move away from the bad stuff, and they're trying to put a label on it, and that's the easiest label that they have. And management, it's interesting. The kind of core definition of a manager, really, a manager is just somebody has said, you're a manager. Like, you've been given that role or that title or that position by somebody, or in a smaller organization, you may have created it. Hey, we had 3 employees, now we have 10. I'm going to be the manager of these employees or something. But a leader is a little trickier, because anybody could be a leader, and no one says, sometimes this happens, but you are now a leader, and excellent, okay, great, everyone follows me. That doesn't really make any sense, but all managers should be leaders. Yes. And
I actually sat at a table. We were at I was at an Agile Alliance board meeting for dinner, and there was a table next to us, and I'm very I watch people frequently, and I'm very observant of what's going on around me. And they were actually at this table having this discussion, and he basically looked at her and said, you have to decide today if you're going to be a manager or a leader. And I took everything inside me to not
You didn't say anything?
No, I did not. What I was going to do was find her afterwards and wait for them to leave. But I just happened to miss when they left, because I was like, I'm not going to jump into their conversation by any means. But I think that adds to the problem of causing a lot of existing managers to just want to stop. I don't want the title. I don't want to go as someone put to the dark side, because then everybody's going to label me, and we're missing out on some really great people being leaders because we feel like there's this like it's either or situation.
Yeah, well, absolutely, and also the other problem that comes along with it is that as people are even if people have that management title, hey, you're a manager, then that what it causes them to do is not engage. So they don't want to engage
because they don't want to micromanage. They don't want to be perceived.
Right, and they don't know how to manage a self-organizing team.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't even sure what a self-organizing team is.
Actually, I had someone in the class yesterday ask, so if we get to self-organizing team, can we get rid of all managers?
Yeah, right.
And it kind of hurts my heart to hear that. Like it's because you didn't get to self-organizing team without and whether it's a manager role but you didn't get there without leadership, and I hope your managers are leaders. I hope that that's true, and so it makes me sad to hear a simplification along those lines, like they're just in the way, and no wonder a lot of managers are rebelling back because they're being triggered.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing is, if you describe the situation to even some of the same people that are in either of these, described it, the same kind of things going on, but didn't use these terms. People, oh, you don't want to do that. That's a terrible idea, and yet. It keeps happening.
You don't want to belittle people, but it's okay to belittle the managers.
That's right. Well, I mean that's the thing we were talking yesterday about scientific management.
Yes.
And this idea that essentially the workers are stupid, and that was kind of this premise with scientific management, or one of them. And obviously, it's a terrible idea and a terrible premise. Workers aren't. Workers have all this intelligence, all this knowledge, and we dismiss that.
But we often also say we hire the best people. Our people
always.
are our greatest asset in the organization.
But we can't trust them.
And in fact, I worked with somebody once that
which doesn't make sense. Don't take that soundbite, right?
Yeah, don't take that out of context and make a clip on it. Oh, I kind of want to troll that.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. But we kind of talk out of both sides with that.
Well, yeah, because what we've done, you said this yesterday, right, which is we've kind of flipped it. And so now it's, the executives and the managers are the idiots, and, the people doing the work have all the knowledge, and there might be another way.
It might be.
Perhaps.
Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right. So and I do think it's the pendulum, right? It just swung now hard the other way. And, the disservice we've done to our leaders and managers is that we haven't dug into these things. We haven't clarified, what this actually means. I mean, our kind of working definition of leadership of a leader at this point is it's somebody who when they're working with people, when they're working with teams, helping people, the change, the things that happen, the things they're able to evoke, surprise the person they're leading, the people they're leading, and themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So it's and that really gets at this core point that
you're leveling everything up
above where you thought. Right. So that says the leader didn't have the answer. Right. There's this premise that I know the answer and I'm just going to lead them to the answer, and that's really not leadership. It's you're leading them and they're creating something that's bigger than you expected. So you're surprised and they're surprised, and that's really kind of what we're aiming for. And there's no reason a manager can't do that.
I hope managers do that. Like that's good management. I was working with Ahmed Sidki not too long ago, and he's like, I don't know why we keep trying to redefine terms. Like all of a sudden it's like bad management, agile leadership is good. No, it's just leadership is good in a lot of ways, and management is good. And how you're applying it, what skills you have makes the difference. Not the title, not the role, not the person.
Right.
With that, and so it's a really fascinating how we keep labeling the stuff, and then getting upset because people are defensive about it. And then trying to move forward with it. It's just not. What was your title? What's your title of your Agile 2018 session? Because I kept thinking about it last night. What did you say?
It's something I believe it's manager versus leader, a problematic distraction to keep you from improving.
Yeah, like it's just
we're not getting any value out of this argument. And then when you see, and feel free, do this right now. Go to Google and search on management versus leader, and go to images and look at some of the images, and you'll see things where it says, a manager plans and a leader inspires. Why can't a manager inspire?
And why can't a leader plan?
Why wouldn't a leader plan? Right? It's a better question. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Or, leaders break rules and managers make rules. Are you serious? So I'm sorry, I'm getting all fired up. But
it's early, Jake.
I know it is early. The class is going to be in trouble today. We're going to be all fired up.
We're hyped up.
Yeah. But so you're telling me that all a leader does is just break rules? Like, what does that even mean? They don't make any rules. They don't. I mean, it just doesn't. You can take some microcosm and go, well, I had this really bad manager who did da 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 da, and I shudder to bring this up, but project managers, because I've heard that they're evil.
They're just evil. I know. I mean, first part of my life, I have a whole section of my career that I was just, I grew horns, and
were they Gantt chart horns?
Yeah. Oh yeah, very much. I actually had somebody reach out to me in a previous class of mine just this 2 weeks ago, going, I'm struggling because I feel like everything I learned now has no value or no interest, and it's like, no, I can't tell you how many times people don't know the difference between a risk and an issue. How many times they understand probability and impact analysis and what they need to do with those kinds of things. And there's so much value in the knowledge. Now, have we applied some of that knowledge in the wrong areas or the wrong type of work? Absolutely. There were great processes and great practices in the project management and the PMBOK, right? Applied to task work. Doesn't apply as well to knowledge work. Right. And when we try to just, it created those problems, but it doesn't mean an entire skill base is useless.
Well, and worse, I think even worse than that is that the humans that do that are worthless.
It's hard for me not to hear when you say humans, go humans.
If you've seen Seinfeld, you know that, might as well explain it, right?
Yeah, I have to, but I can't stop. I hear it.
Yeah. So Jerry, every time Jerry sees Newman, he goes, Newman. And so we often talk about the complex. We're talking about complexity versus complicated, and this idea that with humans, like we can really almost make anything complex. So then we kind of came up with this humans instead of Newman. Yeah. We actually have a poster back there with the world and humans written on it.
But that's part of what fascinates me, right? We, in the Agile community especially, talk a lot about embracing complexity and acknowledging that in knowledge work, it's complex. We have to inspect and adapt. And yet then we find labels. Management's good, management's bad, leadership's good. And it's just too complex for that.
Well, I think, people are, which makes sense, right? I mean, people are looking for the simple kind of approach to it. Like, how do I just tell people this? And most of the stuff you can't just tell people. You have to actually engage in a deeper conversation about it, because it's just not simple. And one of I remember last year we were teaching this class, I think in Denver, and one of the people wrote us, kind of talking about thanking us for the class and what they got out of it and some different ideas. And they had this. They said, this just sounds like after a month after the class, I've thought about this, and it sounds like this great project manager that I worked with, and it just sounds like that. And that's the thing. I mean, there are people who have had project managers who are great, and they're not these evil Gantt chart wielding monsters or something. And sorry to say it that way, but I mean there is this kind of there are people that get into that. And I mean it really comes down to, do they have the skills, do they understand the stuff, and can you engage with them enough to understand what do they value?
I remember having a conversation with a former project manager of mine, a former boss, turned into a boss, turned into my manager, right? And we were joking years later. I mean, this has been years since we had worked together, whatever. And we were joking because he's like, I was like, I don't think I ever thanked you for being a mentor to me, right? Like he was my manager, but he was a leader. And he was good he was challenging me. He was doing all those things, but he was also very, making sure things were getting done and what needed to happen, but in a way that supported me, not fit into the stereotype of management along those lines. And, but that's the experience. I hope everybody has those, right? Like, I would want that combination for people. And so I hate the dichotomy of going, this just fits over here. Like they make rules and they break rules. And it just, how does that even work for me?
It doesn't get us anywhere. I mean, it doesn't, it's, right at the end of the day, it's like, where do you think this is going to lead us? How is this going to help?
Well, that's an issue. So what's the motivation for that labeling? Like, so if I'm talking with somebody and they're kind of coming at it from this, like, well, management just needs to get out of the way.
Well, right. Cause here's,
what's the
value, right?
Yeah, what's the value?
Because because it's very easy, just even as we're talking, right, for us to go down the road and saying those people that are calling managers bad, they're bad, right? Well, we haven't got to, right?
We haven't got to, but we could.
But you could easily slide into that, right?
But what's their motivation? What's the value that they're getting from wanting that label?
Right. Well, and to me, it's there's a lot of it's frustration, right? People are frustrated by having to do these kind of like, why do I have to create, a 2-year plan, right? My manager's telling me to create a 2-year plan because their manager's telling them to, and then it's like, well,
because it's how we've always done it.
It's how we've done it, or it's just government. Well, it's just we're a large organization. Well, it's just we're a legacy organization. Well, it's just, and there's always one of those in there. There's always that kind of, I guess that kind of. People throwing it out and saying it's because of this. It's because of this. It's kind of a justification,
You just saying that reminded me. I did a session a long time ago, which is now ironic in this conversation here. But the session was kind of my journey from management to leadership. Mm-hmm. But in it, I actually was highlighting I'm doing both. Mm-hmm. But why it was challenging to embrace some of more of the leadership qualities as a type A OCD individual and what challenges came into it. But I think that a lot of it was what I was highlighting in that session, I don't know, 7 years ago, was the courage to go against some of those things.
Yeah.
The courage to be in a role that's labeled manager, to want to lead, to to do those things, but have the dynamics coming back and feeling kind of stuck in the middle in some ways.
Well, yeah.
And it was challenging. And so, but I'm now even thinking about how I labeled that session, going, should have labeled it differently, right? But even in that moment, that was where I was at too, because you get that message so many times that now I realize the ridiculousness of it, but even in that moment when I was in that place as a director of development, like I had that terminology.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, we know this from the people in the class here, and we know this from our experience. I mean, there's people right now, you may be watching this and going, "Hey, I just got a performance review, and it said I need to be more of a leader instead of a manager." And I mean, I'm trying to remember if it was a session I did, or an article I was writing or wrote. But it was kind of along those lines of just trying to figure out how do I talk about these terms, right? Yeah. And I look back 10 years ago, I just didn't even have the wording to talk about the things that I'm saying now. I didn't have the wording to explain it or even to understand it, frankly.
Because if I got that feedback, I'd be like, give me something specific. Like, what am I not doing?
You're not inspiring. You're planning too much, right? But I mean, that's what the meme would say, right?
And then, at least gives me something more than just the generic "you're not leading," because that's the hard part. Is I think we all want leadership, but we don't know really what that means, and so we go down those paths. I mean, that's part of the reason why we do this course, right? Is we then end up going down these paths of you're empowered and hope that sticks.
which doesn't work.
By the way, don't take that as a snippet either.
Right. Just telling people they're empowered generally decreases how they do. I mean, they tend to do worse.
But that made me think of the interesting if we're just, instead of realizing that this is a ridiculous question, we're doubling down on this, and as a result, people are getting worse results because now they're trying to force it in ways that doesn't make sense. They're letting go of things that, like, well, I don't deal with any risks. I'm just a servant leader. Like, no, you should be paying attention to risks.
You've got to be
as you're going along,
and helping people understand what is a risk.
Identify risks.
Half the people don't quite understand what a risk is,
or how to mitigate, or how to respond to it. That there's more than just mitigation as responses.
Right. You can avoid it. Like if you
can enhance it. A risk might be an opportunity. Right. And these are things that a lot of people are not even familiar with. But by getting feedback like that, by doubling down on this, like, you're too much of a manager, not enough of a leader, without specifics, without something tangible for people to work on, without tools or techniques or understanding of what they're really trying to do with that, they could be giving up the wrong things in that process.
Well, and so much of it comes down to, as well, right? I mean, talking to the people that you're supposed to be leading, right? And saying, hey, what do you need from me? What could I do differently? How can I help you? How can I do something that, or what can I not do, right? What can I do? What can I not do? And it has to be more than simply just, oh, don't come to our meetings or don't come. That doesn't, right? That's just not, that's not sufficient. It's, what do people really need? And what are you doing to create the environment where they can thrive, where they can do the amazing things you hired them to do? I mean, we have all these people that could be doing things. Talk about, people are always talking about, productivity and the workforce and how do we get more effective and efficient and all this, which is great, but it's great conceptually. But you think about how many people don't bring up ideas to their manager, to their leader, because their manager or leader doesn't have time, right? Maybe caught doing things that aren't as valuable, rather than engaging with people and working with them and finding out what do they need. So many times oh yeah, we knew that was going to happen, or oh yeah, we saw that a few months ago. It's like, well, why didn't you say anything? It's because the last 100 times I brought something up, you didn't have time. And it wasn't because the person, the manager, the leader was bad. They just literally didn't have time because there's so many other things going on. And so, we really have to keep tapping into. We have to tap into all the people in the organization, and that's kind of the whole point with Agile. Is kind of shift control with competency down, right? Same kind of things.
And I actually use slightly different terminology than just even shift control, because I think for me that perpetuates it even a little bit.
Sure, if you have right. It's like enable.
But it's that sharing, and we talk about this all the time in our class. It's how do you extend that feeling of ownership,
right?
That dynamic that makes us work. When I was replacing the state of Michigan's Medicaid system, I was working 60, 70 plus hour weeks. We had a good team environment, cultures and things, but I had all that weight, and I felt all that weight, and it made me go above and beyond. I wanted to deliver in those things, but on the same note, I felt all the ownership. And how do you help the team actually have a sense of that? And when I think back, you mentioned good managers. When I think back to people in my past, I've had good and I've had bad managers. And the good managers were allowing me to feel that sense of ownership. They were leading as a result, right? And I never bought, it didn't matter. They're either good or not good, right? In that sense. It didn't matter if they were good managing or good leading. Like that, there was no differentiation. It was just, because it's too complex. They're doing too many things. At times, I needed certain things, regardless of what label you put it on. It was that they were willing to do that, regardless if they had time, willing to do that, to support, to challenge me, to encourage me to do things that I didn't think I was capable of doing.
Well, and I'm with you. I think that it's the problem with, saying we're going to empower people. That means you have the power. Saying we're going to, pass control down. right? Then you have the control. I'm going to enable you. That means you can't do it yourself, right? I mean, that whole genre, right? It's why we talked about kind of engaging, right?
Yes.
But it's that. But I think something you said in there, reminded me of the, every time, just because a manager, just because a human did something, right? Just because a human said, gave, maybe tried to say, you can do this now, or did something in a bad way, quote unquote bad way, they did that. That's one time. They don't always have to do that. So it comes down to, like, what's the value? What are they trying to get? Why are they trying to do it that way? Maybe it's because, like you said earlier, they're trying to do it that way, or they've been doing that way all along. But they don't have to continue doing it that way. They can always change. It's I tried this. Let me try something else. Let me try something else. Let me, what might work. But we've kind of set up almost this dynamic where you can't talk to the bad manager, can't talk to the bad leader, because they're not going to listen. It's like, well, maybe they would listen if we talked to them a different way.
I know I'm eternally grateful for the people that helped highlight my mixed messages that I didn't know that I was doing.
Yeah.
Right. A really simple one was just I kept encouraging, like, I want to experiment. We want people to learn and do things. And somebody looked at me like, but you don't ever fail. Like, you deliver every single time. And I'm like, what do you mean? I fail all the time. And I ended up realizing that I wasn't being transparent about it, that I wasn't sharing what was happening with those. So all I did was start putting, like, a lesson learned up outside of my desk, like, every week, of, like, something I tried and didn't work.
Did you use, like, the long butcher paper?
No, I kept it to one a week, right? But even that was just little tiny mixed messages that really counts on people to help other people grow, right? Mm-hmm. Like, it was, as I said yesterday, and as you mentioned today, it's, giving the same courtesy to the knowledge workers. Well, managers are knowledge workers too. Right. And so giving that same courtesy of the growth and learning, and if we start helping each other with that, maybe we might all really start liking where we work. Possibly. And delivering stuff for us.
So everyone right now, just start doing it right now. All right, there, that's solved. So what else do you want to talk about?
Stop debating, just start, right?
Right. But I think there's this, we often do the failure bow, right, which kind of comes from theater and improv, where you just stand up and, I have failed, and do a big bow, and people are supposed to applaud that, and it's part of it's kind of making it fun, making it a game.
We do.
And people in class are saying they do that, but it changes the dynamic, because it takes some of that stigma away from that. Oh, we failed, and that's a bad thing. That's how you learn. So if you're not willing to tell people the times you failed, tell people when you've made those mistakes. I make mistakes pretty much every day, and so I find as I talk about those, it's kind of like, it kind of starts to break that down. Even for me, just saying, yep, I screwed this up, just saying that out loud has an impact on how things are working.
And so we've got to wrap this up because we have class to get to.
We do have class.
But
people are coming in.
I think for us, this comes down to, and Jake will be talking more about this at Agile 2018, is stop worrying about the dynamic. Be both, right? And just support, help, level people up. Like, that's level teams up, level organizations up. That's the focus, not whether or not what label you have. Doesn't matter.
And for the people that have a manager, have some empathy for them, have some compassion for them, and maybe work with them. So this goes both ways. Someday you could be a manager. Someday you could be a leader. We'd probably say you're probably a leader now, because everybody really is in some capacity. So think about how you're going to work with them, with the people that are your managers, or the person that's maybe struggling. How can you help them?
Have a great day, guys.
See ya.